framework is needed urgently. My name is Carlos Alvarado Quesada. I'm the former president of Costa Rica and chair of the GCCM Foundation. So following on why that new framework is needed, we already have some tools, obviously, to confront climate change, as the Paris Agreement, the Sendai Framework, the Global Compact for Migration. But they remain silo and not a comprehensive language, common language, in which we can confront the challenges of climate mobility drawn through climate change. That is why the effort has been together to build this new framework with a common language, a common understanding on how to address these threats. And it's built upon many decades of scientific research and grounded on the existing international law and policy, so to offer a coherent framework and a response. The principles that have been worked and are offered now are voluntary and non-binding. But I was just talking to Kamala Macron, telling me a new country saying yes to the list, long list now of countries that are endorsing these frameworks. In a world in which multilateralism is more fragmented, this is demonstrated that multilateral institutions can work. The principles that we're going to see throughout these 2 days go into 3 pillars or 3 lines of action. The first is enabling the agency of communities. We will talk and listen over and over the importance of respecting, but foremost enabling positive adaptive journeys. And who decides the route, the direction of those journeys? It's communities themselves. But for that, we need to put into place the tools to enable this to happen. For example, the right to stay, the right to remain where people have their ancestors, their livelihoods, their memories, their lives. But sometimes that it's not possible because of sea level rise, because of extreme heat. So if that's not possible, how can we create safe pathways for people? Also, how to address climate immobility when people cannot have the possibility to move even when their life is at risk. How can we support that? The second big pillar of these principles has to be on a rights-based approach. That means respecting, defending, protecting, enforcing, enhancing the human rights of the people across the board, with no distinction, with solidarity, with a bold vision. And the first imperative is localizing adaptation. There are lots of frameworks out there, or lots of mechanisms, But when we discuss with the leaders, the ministers, the presidents, prime ministers of many of the affected countries, a constant is the difficulty to access to finance, the difficulty that bureaucracy responds in time, in place, to the necessities of the people. We have climate finance that we know yet is not enough, but it's not reaching the places we need it to be there. So that's why we are here. We are here to keep moving forward courageously in this journey that we are shaping together. Friends, as we speak, climate change is already shaping not only the present but the future. The life of the unborn has already been touched by what's going on now. And it's up to us what we do to give the conditions for their journey to be a better one. That's the calling of this Berlin Climate Mobility Forum, what we can do now. So for the next 2 days, we'll be working on that subject, and we will be listening from leaders and champions, from the youth, from civil society, from different governors, partners, on how we can enhance that spirit. So, in that spirit, let us begin. And I would like to, yes, you can clap. I would like now to introduce, and this better have audio because it's important. I'd like to introduce the address of His Excellency Frank-Walter Steinmeier, President of the Federal Republic of Germany.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Berlin and to the Berlin Climate Mobility Forum. Climate mobility is not a distant prospect. It is already a pressing reality for millions of people. And it is deeply linked to security, stability, and human rights. But climate change is often not the only driver of migration. It compounds economic hardship, violent conflicts, political fragility, and social inequality. People face impossible choices. Many are forced to life-altering decisions. The resilience needed to face these challenges is powerfully illustrated by nations like Cape Verde. I was there 3 years ago. I saw the remarkable leadership and commitment of both the people and government as they work to tackle climate change. When I think about all my engagement with small island developing states over the years, it is striking to me that it is the most vulnerable, those who have contributed little to global emissions, who bear the heaviest burden of climate change. Germany stands in solidarity with those communities. Adaptation is not just about building infrastructure, but about preserving jobs, cultures, independence, freedom of choice, and the very fabric of society. We are deeply engaged in addressing these global challenges. The climate mobility principles represent a cornerstone of our efforts. I would like to express my sincere thanks to the Robert Bosch Foundation and the Global Center for Climate Mobility for this essential forum. We need collective action. I hope this forum is a space for sharing best practice, fostering innovation, and deepening our collective resolve. Germany is ready to partner with you and to help build a future where mobility is a choice, not a necessity. I'm convinced that climate action is inseparable from global security and prosperity. Our only path to achieving this is to limit global warming in line with the Paris Agreement. I hope that your discussions today will help pave the way towards a world that is more just, secure, and sustainable for all. Thank you so much.
We thank President Steinmeier for his remarks. And now we're going to introduce and listen from our two co-hosts of this event, Ms. Ottilie Valls, Senior Vice President of the Robert Bosch Stiftung, and Professor Kamal Amakrane, Managing Director of the GCCM. Please.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends. It is a profound honor to welcome you back to Berlin for the second Berlin Climate Mobility Forum on behalf of the Robert Bosch Stiftung. I would like to thank the German government for their continuous partnership in addressing climate mobility, and especially His Excellency, the President of Germany, Mr. Frank-Walter Steinmeier, for his personal engagement and the inspiring words in his video message. I also want to extend my sincere gratitude to our partners at the Global Center for Climate Mobility, especially to its Managing Director, Kamal Amakrane. Thank you, Kamal, for your tireless leadership, and your unwavering commitment to this critical cause. Climate mobility has been a key issue for the work of the Robert Bosch Stiftung for many years. Climate mobility is the human face of the climate crisis. It is a major global challenge that can only be addressed through close and effective international cooperation. And in doing so, it is essential to uphold and protect human dignity. When we convened here last year, we recognized the fundamental truth. Climate mobility is not a challenge of the distant future. It is the defining reality of our present. 1 year later, the urgency has only intensified. Increasing climate impacts continue to threaten communities, livelihoods, and regional stability. This is the new normal, but for many of the countries represented here today, particularly from the majority world, this has been the reality for years. We also see that this same reality has reached Europe, but the ability to adapt to these impacts is unequally distributed worldwide. This stark inequality persists because the international response remains fragmented and reactive. Meanwhile, adaptation is already happening on the ground, often without the resources and frameworks to guide it. That is why this forum is so essential. We are here with a shared, ambitious objective: to build a global consensus and lay the groundwork for a concrete roadmap for action. This year, we will put forth global principles for addressing climate mobility, and this framework represents a commitment to human rights and dignity. And it allows us to proactively shape our shared reality rather than simply reacting to yet another crisis. The framework relies on a crucial dual approach. We must protect communities' right to stay by effectively investing in local adaptation. And we must establish safe, regular, and predictable pathways for those who must move. But we must also address the gap between these two options. Some may choose to stay, but others simply cannot leave. With this, our principles must give more choice and enable positive adaptation. And with this, we are not just safeguarding lives, we are safeguarding cultures, identities, and local knowledge. To achieve all of this, we must align global climate finance with local needs and local expertise. Initiatives like the Community's Climate Adaptation Facility, CCAF, led by the GCCM, are exemplary. This forum is an opportunity to reinforce international partnerships and strengthen resilience of frontline communities. To do so, we must align all levels of government and society. This means bringing together governments, experts and financial partners, local leaders, including mayors and representatives of communities on the front lines of this crisis. Your collective action is key as we work towards the climate mobility adaptation agenda, the practical roadmap for policy, partnership, and finance. Excellencies, distinguished guests, over the next 2 days, let us turn these principles into tangible action. Let us ensure that every individual facing the impacts of climate change can pursue a dignified and secure future. Thank you and welcome to Berlin.
Good morning. I hope it has been a safe trip so far and that you're enjoying Berlin as much as I do. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we gather today at a moment when trust is becoming a rare commodity. Across regions, across institutions, confidence is eroding. Geopolitical competition is narrowing the space of cooperation. We see growing pressure on the principles and the institutions that have shaped international relations for decades. Some already say or predict that we have arrived to a new era, an era defined not by common purpose, but by transactions, not by solidarity, but by leverage. And yet, here in Berlin, we see something different. We see proof that cooperation still matters. We see evidence that even in divided times, the community of nations can find common ground. Today, in these halls and outside, over 107 countries are represented. Their voice, their future, and their stories. We have governments, communities, institutions, and partners from every region of the world. Indeed, different stories. Indeed, different interests, and definitely different circumstances, yet united by one truth. Climate change, it's about people. And people must remain at the center of the response. That is why I am optimistic. I am optimistic because we already have secured 51 endorsements for the principles of global principles for climate mobility. 51 nations choosing cooperation over isolation. 51 nations choosing action over inertia. 51 nations choosing hope over resignation. And this is only the beginning. My dear friends, I am optimistic because I have witnessed what is possible. 5 years ago, the journey of the Global Center for Climate Mobility started with a small group of committed stewards. Today, that effort has grown into a coalition of more than 65 champion countries and 100 partner and communities and organizations in support of people-centered climate action. Together, we have built something remarkable, and we did not arrive here by chance. We arrived here through trust, through persistence, through partnership. I am deeply grateful to all of you. I am deeply grateful to your trust, and I'm deeply grateful to all your communities and to your governments for your support. I am also, and particularly, very much grateful to Germany and the Robert Bosch Stiftung for their unwavering support and their leadership. Together, Madam Minister, we have achieved what many once believed impossible. My friends, together, we have achieved what some have laughed at times. First, and I have to reiterate it again, we worked hard together and we secured international recognition that statehood endures. Sovereignty is permanent. Maritime zones are fixed, regardless of the changes of NATO and of sea level rise. We elevated together the protection of culture, heritage, and identity as essential pillars, not only of the climate action agenda, but also of the political action agenda. We demonstrated that climate finance can reach frontline communities in weeks, not years. We proved that community-led adaptation delivers efficiency and impact at speed. Across dozens of projects, across regions, communities showed us that what resilience looks like. And definitely, they insisted, not dependency, not charity, but agency and dignity, leadership. But most importantly, we have achieved and we were able to change the narrative, because people do not want to leave the places they call home, because people do not want sympathy. They ask for opportunity. They ask for knowledge. They ask for a fair chance to shape their own adaptation journey. Excellencies, my dear friends, I am optimistic because history is not written for us. History is shaped by us, by the decisions we take, by the bridges we build when others choose walls. Before I left home for Berlin, my eldest son, Zaid, 12 years old, looked at me and said, "Abi, please tell your friend the only failure is to give up." A timely reminder, because the challenges before us are great, but our determination is greater. Our purpose is greater, and together our future will be greater still. So I ask all of you, leave this forum with one commitment, one new partnership, one community supported. This is how our movement will grow, one decision at a time. Thank you again for your time, and thank you for being with us. Thank you very much.
Thanks to Ottilie Valls from the Robert Bosch Stiftung and Kamala Makrane from the GCCM, our co-hosts for this event. And now we'll listen from our host country. I'd like to introduce Dr. Barbara Koffler, Parliamentary State Secretary to the Federal Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany, who will deliver remarks on behalf of the Minister, Her Excellency Rem Alavali Radovan. Ma'am, Doctor, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Alvarado Quesada, Mrs. Belz, Professor Macran, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me, in behalf of my minister, to be here. She would have loved to be with you today, but you know how the schedule of ministers is sometimes. So I have the honor to deliver her speech, and I'm very grateful to do so and see all of you here in Berlin. First of all, I would love to say welcome to Berlin. Well, my president, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, was pointing out it precisely. Nobody should be forced to decide, do I want to stay or do I have to leave? Nobody should be forced to decide, do I risk that my home will be destroyed by the next flood when I'm staying? Do we risk that the next drought will ruin our harvest again? Or in avoiding that risk, should we leave and then losing not only our home, but also our community, our history, our personal history, our livelihoods, and part of what we are, how our life is constructed and how we like to live? That is a question nobody should be asked to. But millions of people today, for them it's not something abstract, for them it's reality, unfolding every day. And it shows climate change is not only an environmental crisis, it's also a human crisis. Across the globe we have seen the pictures, we have seen the videos, droughts, floods, storms, rising sea levels are already influencing how people live and whether they can remain in their homes. More and more people are being displaced by extreme weather events. and most of them in their own countries. According to the Internal Displacement Management Center, natural disaster it triggered the displacement of almost 30 million people in the past year, in 2025. The number remains near record highs. And the latest report of the IDMC shows the conflict and climate-related disaster increasingly overlap. In 42 countries, people move due to conflict and violence as well as disasters. This overlap makes vulnerable communities even more fragile and increases displacement. This vicious circle is seen in many places around the globe. Recurrent droughts and periods of floods have combined with decades of armed conflict and insecurity, forcing millions of people to leave their homes. We see that on many places. Multiple risks for peace, security, and stability arise out of climate change. We see that chain reaction. There is no rain, or heavy rainfalls, then there's a drought coming, the wells run dry, livestock dies, pastures turn to dust. Communities are forced to compete for little water they have, and grazing ground remain. This leads to rivalry, families who lost everything end up in crowded camps, no income, no way home. And that is exactly then the power vacuum which armed groups exploit, controlling water, taxing the desperate, recruiting those with nothing to lose. Climate change does not start the war, but it lights the fuse. Internationally, human mobility has long been recognized as a central dimension of climate change. This has been shown at the COPs and other international policy processes, like the Global Compact for Migration and the Task Force on Displacement under the Paris Agreement. However, that's not enough. The focus should not longer be only simply in recognizing the fact on climate mobility, but also, and that's why we are here, but also on coordinated action and concrete partnership. On how to scale implementation worldwide to respond to this human crisis and prevent further negative consequences. And that is exactly why you all were coming to Berlin. That's exactly why the Berlin Climate Mobility Forum is so important. It reflects growing global commitment. It was said so eloquently, and it was sending out such a positive message. I want to thank you for that, Professor Abelkamp. That was really very, very inspiring. It brings together governments, international organizations, affected communities, researchers, and financial institutions. And together, we are defining the climate mobility principles and a plan for action. We share the global strengthening prevention, the goal of strengthening prevention, adaptation, resilience, protection, and solutions for people and communities, and especially on the front lines of the climate crisis. Because no country can address these challenges by itself. It's so important that we cooperate together. And you were, Mr. President, you were exactly pointing on that we have to cooperate, that multilateral cooperation is key to this solution, to the solution of the crisis. As I was pointing out, the crises are overlapping, they are growing, and also political pressure is growing. And that's why we need this coordination and this cooperation, and we need multilateral action even more than in times before. Climate impact does not stop at borders, and neither should our responses. And that is why Germany and also my Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, we are focusing on exactly that cooperation, even more strategically and closely, and especially directed on the people's realities and on the contexts on the ground. And that means three things for us. First thing is prevention and adaptation. Second point, safe and dignified mobility. Third point, supporting receiving regions and cities. It means for us investing in the resilience and stability of societies and to invest in the risk reduction and especially in adaptation strategies to secure livelihoods and in opening up new opportunities. And it means for us we have to create new partnership on every level, globally, regionally, and especially locally. We work together to make sure that people have real choices. The choice to stay where they are, if they wish to do so. The option to move safely with dignity if migration becomes inevitable. How do we achieve those goals in practical terms? Let me add a few comments to the 3 principles I was just pointing out. First, prevention and adaptation. We are working strongly together with our partner countries, and we aim to enhance climate resilience. Let me give you a few short examples. In partnership with the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, a human mobility watch system is being developed that can forecast climate and disaster-related displacement. This serves to turn evidence-based data into everyday policy decisions. Another example is the Continental Strategy on Human Mobility in the context of climate change. It is being developed together with the African Union. The strategy aims to ensure that participation of young people, women, people with disabilities, indigenous people, and many other groups is decision-making and implementation processes. In this way, the needs of those most affected should be taken into the decision-making process. Another topic we are working on is support prevention is early warning systems. Initiatives such as the Climate Risk and Early Warning System initiatives are key to prepare people for climate-related events so that fewer people have to leave their homes. These systems improve forecasting, preparedness, and access to timely and actionable information. They help vulnerable communities anticipate and effectively respond to climate risks before human mobility becomes unavoidable. That's only a few examples on prevention and adaptation. Much more is going on with all of you, with all your commitment, and much more we are working on jointly. Second, the aspect of how we respond to climate impacts is our support of safe and dignified mobility. Where climate impacts makes movement unavoidable, we have to act that people can keep their dignity and have a safe migration path. We do so, for example, via the platform on disaster displacement. We support solutions for people who have been internally displaced by disasters, and we help share best practice widely. With many partner countries, I just can point out a few here in that momentum. We have worked jointly and effectively together, for example, with Fiji, where we work with the government and affected communities with relocations that are voluntary and planned, both. Here, especially women's knowledge of household management, food systems, caregiving is key for planning decisions on settlement design and resource access. That is why we ensure that representation, for example, on relocation committees is key, is important for us. Finally, the third element I was just pointing out is the engagement and cooperation with receiving regions and cities. They have the greatest responsibility. One good example I would like to share is our cooperation with Madagascar, where the pressures on resources and receiving communities is increasing and creating challenges for social cohesion. I think everybody can understand what I'm talking about in that context. Local authorities with whom we are working in Balnea region are responding to this by developing a regional migration management strategy, by improving access to land, and by strengthening social cohesion between those who are coming and the host communities. And last but not least, by creating income opportunities. especially in the agricultural sector, especially for women and young people. That example shows us how in that example Madagascar and can act and is acting at the local level, and how that can make a difference. Under that development, under that cooperation, and under our cooperation with Madagascar, we are supporting that efforts and that work. Ladies and gentlemen, Germany has been an early mover in climate mobility to advance practical solutions and strengthen political recognition. What we have learned over the years is clear. Climate mobility is a defining global challenge of our time, and it is a test of our collective responsibility. Success depends on strong partnerships with governments, international organizations, cities, local authorities, civil society, and most important, directly with the affected communities. I'm very proud to say that Germany therefore strongly supports the global consensus on climate mobility and the principles for which it stands. Let us act early, let us act together so that more families have a real choice whether they want to stay or they want to move to another place. Thank you very much that you're here, and thank you for your engagement.